Hey everyone, welcome back from your extended spring break. We're about to embark on Jason and the Argonauts, social distance style. Yeah. Alright, I know you all remember very well where we left off last time. So last time, we did a general introduction to Greek saga, and we talked a bit about the historical as well as cultural importance of Jason and the Argonauts and its connection to colonization, right? We talked about folktale connections that we have with this particular story. And we also got into the very early part of the story. We need to find out if there's a quest for this golden fleece. Well, where exactly did this golden fleece come from? So we already discussed that as well. And if you happen to miss that part, don't worry, because your textbook does go into detail about this saga. Nice part of this semester is that we're no longer hopping around the book as much. The sagas take up a pretty good sized chunk of the textbook themselves. All right, so now we're ready to get into new stuff. So in the myth, we have a rivalry or a dispute between Jason and King Peleus. Now, the thing about this is that Jason's father, Aeson, that's his name right here, is the rightful ruler of Colchis, but he was overthrown by his brother Peleus. Peleus did not have any real claim to the throne. He was not the rightful heir to the throne, but he overthrew his brother nonetheless. And Aeson feared that something might happen to his young son, Jason. And so to protect him from his uncle Peleus, he sends him away to be raised and tutored by Chiron the good centaur. There we go. First of many times we'll see Chiron in these various sagas. So Jason lives with Chiron for around 20 years, and when he is finally grown, he decides to return home and reclaim his father's rightful his rightful place in the kingdom. Okay, so in the meantime, Peleus had traveled to see the oracle at Delphi, and the oracle tells him to beware of the man with one sandal. And so Peleus knows that he will be killed by a descendant of Iolcus. He doesn't know who, but he knows to beware of the man with one sandal. As Jason is traveling back to Iolcus, he happens to run into Hera. Hera disguises herself as an old woman, and she stands beside a river. And when he offers to help her across and carries her across, he becomes one of her favorites. So, Hera actually likes someone for a change. That's pretty awesome. All right. But guess what happened in the course of crossing the river? He loses his sandal. Yes. All right. So that's how he winds up arriving in Iolcus with just one sandal. By the way, in case you are thinking that, Hera just decided to like Jason out of the goodness of her heart, she actually hated Peleus. Peleus refuses to sacrifice to Hera, so she was looking for someone to like and to overthrow Peleus. All right. So when Jason arrives in Iolcus, Peleus immediately recognizes him for the threat that he is, because he's the only man walking around in one sandal. So in order to avoid an actual fight for the throne and any actual dispute, because Jason is the rightful heir, so in order to avoid conflict, Peleus says, well, if you go and get me this famed mythical golden fleece, I will let you just take over. You can just have the throne. And so Jason readily understands that this is an insuperable task, something that a mere mortal man should not be able to do, but he readily undertakes it. And so, just to give you an idea of where this story takes place, you have Iolcus here in this particular region. And you can see down here, right here, and this will give you kind of the path that that they took. Okay? So, to prepare for the voyage, again, a quick reminder, remember this story is supposedly about the very first ship that was ever built and the very first expedition that the Greeks ever undertook. So, first thing they need is a ship because nobody has any, right? Athena enters the picture here. She is also one of Jason's fans. He is one of her favorites. And so she helps them to build the ship named the Argo. The Argo means swift. Now, kind of confusing, the Argo is built by a demigod carpenter whose special skill is building, and his name is Argus. So Argus built the Argo. Athena helped them to obtain the wood from an oak tree that was sacred to Zeus, and because of this sacred oak, the ship could tell them the future. Yes, the ship could talk and tell the future. All right. Now, the crew of the Argo includes 50 sailors. Now, you might find details of other numbers, but 50 is the commonly accepted number of Argonauts. 2 of the Argonauts seem a bit out of place. One of them is Orpheus and the other is Heracles. Now, keeping in mind that this is a story that takes place before the Trojan War, it's a pre-Homeric story. Orpheus is actually a post-Homeric hero, so he would occur, much, much later down the timeline. So he wouldn't even been around yet. So that's odd. And Heracles is another curious inclusion because he's a major hero in himself. So he is pretty quickly dispatched from the trip because he couldn't accept Jason's leadership. He performed several heroic deeds in the first little bit of the trip that would have easily overshadowed Jason and many of the other Argonauts. Okay. The various heroes of the trip do represent many various Greek city-states, not just Thessaly. And we find a inclusion of many of the heroes of the Caledonian boar hunt. Again, it might be a little curious, but we have to have a ship full of heroes because, once again, this is not a trip that any mere mortal would be able to do. So the Caledonian boar hunt, for a little background information, is a hunt for the Caledonian boar, and that was a gigantic boar that was sent by Artemis to ravage the countryside of Caledon to punish King Oeneus for neglecting her in the offer of the first fruits to the gods. So King Oeneus summons heroes from throughout Greece to hunt down and kill the beast, and the famed Caledonian boar hunt ensued was led by the king's own son, Meleager, who struck the killing blow. The hero, however, awarded the skin trophy, the skin of the boar, the hide, to Atalanta, who was an Amazon warrior, as a prize for drawing first blood. Atalanta dedicated the hide to Artemis, and she hung it from a tree in a sacred Arcadian grove precious to Artemis. So, there's one of our female heroes as well. Now, many of the parents of the heroes of the Trojan War also appear. Peleus, this is different from the king that Jason is in opposition from. Peleus, Telamon, Oileus. There are several specialized heroes as well. Castor and Polydeuces are brothers. Castor is, he's a demigod whose special gift is horsemanship. that doesn't seem to be very handy on a boat, but whatever, right? But his brother, on the other hand, his demigod talent is to be a boxer, and we will see how that plays out. Zetes and Calais is another brother pair. They are sons of the North Wind, and they have wings and can fly. That will also come in handy. Obviously, we talked about Argus before. Argus, there it is. Argus is the builder, and Tiphys, he is a pilot. He is a son of Poseidon, and when nobody has navigated the waters before, I guess there's no better person than to have as a pilot than a son of Poseidon. All right, so that's the background information. Let's get into the voyage itself. So, the voyage to Colchis takes place in several stops. This ship is certainly capable of traveling a long ways, but it cannot hold a whole bunch of stores, and so they have to make periodic stops. All right, so again, another little graphic here of how the trip went and the directions that they took. Okay, so good test question is in terms of what happens in each of these stops. Okay, so their very first stop is on the island of Lemnos. The island of Lemnos does not have any men. Women rule the island because all of the men have left. Why did they leave, you ask? Well, the women of the island neglected their worship of Aphrodite, and so they were punished with really bad body odor. Yeah, really bad body odor. So their husbands leave them and go to a, neighboring island and take all new wives. And that doesn't go over very well with the women of Lemnos either. So they attack their former husbands and kill all of them, with the exception, some say, of the queen, or princess, but queen once all the men leave, Queen Hypsipyle's father. Supposedly, she spares him. So, when the Argonauts land in their island, they're very happy to see a ship full of men because they hope they will stay at least long enough so they can use them to repopulate the island. Let's just say it. Okay, so they want to use them for sex. The men coming off the ship, they're okay with that, and they don't seem to be bothered by the bad body odor. They are 50 men who've been stuck on a ship, so yeah, makes sense. Anyway, the men are pretty happy on the island of Lemnos, and they kind of forget the whole point of their journey, and it is Heracles who has to rally the men and convince them to leave so they can continue their quest. Now, Jason gets busy with Queen Hypsipyle, and they have 2 sons which will appear in later sagas when they save their mother who gets captured by pirates. But again, that's not part of this story. All right, so they leave the island of the Stinky Women, and they then travel to Cyzicus. In Cyzicus, they are welcomed warmly by the king because he has received a prophecy from an oracle that says that they are to welcome strangers and that these strangers will help them with their problem. They have a problem with a giant, okay? And actually an earthborn giant. So Heracles slays the earthborn giant in gratitude for the king's hospitality, and they throw a big party and celebrate the Argonauts and the death of this giant, and then they send them off on their merry way. However, when they leave Cyzicus, they get blown off course by a storm, and they end up right back in Cyzicus and are mistaken for night raiders and attacked. The Argonauts reciprocate, and they wind up killing a lot of people, including the king. And they're kind of like, oops, sorry. We'll just head on out right now. All right, 2 stops so far. There's still several to go on the way to Colchis, and I'll pick that up in video number 2.